Hey, welcome to the podcast. This is um, a Health Connection podcast. I'm Don Olson, the host, and I'm uh, have a guest on today, Marva Sletton, who's a physical therapist I've known for many years, and she has a specialty now in Traeger, and she's going to tell us a little bit about that and how that can impact your lives. So, Marva, can you tell us a little bit about your background and how you got involved in this?
Okay. Well, as you said, I am a PT. I, um, I graduated from physical therapy school in 1978, a long time ago. And but anyway, since then, I also became a certified Traeger practitioner. I am certified in complete decongestive therapy and lymphedema treatment. Over the years, I got um, several fitness certifications and a massage license. Um, when um, when COVID came along, I had been working in an outpatient practice for a while. I also had a small private clientele, but anyway, when COVID happened, I stopped working at the clinic, and then when it reopened, I decided not to go back and to focus on developing a private clientele more, which I did, and it was going pretty well. It was going actually really well. And then Hurricane Ian came. And
Mm.
so, um, uh, anyway, since then, um, I haven't been working nearly as much. I mean, for all practical purposes, I'm retired, but I have a few private clients that I see. And my emphasis now, my focus is definitely on Traeger. Um, I see some lymphatic drainage clients, but mostly Traeger, and that's where I want my energy to go for a lot of reasons that we will talk about. Um, um, and then over the last year, I have started teaching some continuing education courses related to Traeger for massage therapists. So that's kind of it in a nutshell.
Okay. Can you tell us what Traeger actually is? What does the technique involve?
Well, okay. First of all, it's actually not a technique at all. There's no prescribed uh, procedure, protocol, um, uh, uh, sequence of things. Now, having said that, when a student is learning Traeger, they do learn specific things because those are tools. It's a way of understanding the work. But what it's really about is it is an approach to um, working with someone to affect change first in their mind, and by way of their mind, their body. Okay. Milton Traeger, I wanted to read something. Milton Traeger is the person who developed this. And first, it was entirely intuitive. He was just interested in movement, and he was very interested in kind of seeing what his own body would do. But ultimately, he became a physician. And anyway, that's another story. But this is a quote from him. My work is directed toward reaching the unconscious mind of the client. Every move, every thought communicates how tissue should feel when everything is right. The mind is the whole thing. That's all I'm interested in. I'm convinced that for every physical non yielding condition, there is a psychic counterpart in the unconscious mind corresponding exactly to the degree of the physical manifestation. Okay, So his idea was that by the practitioner learning a certain quality of movement and touch, that they use their hands to communicate that feeling state to the client. Okay. And by doing that, they created in the client this this feeling state of deep relaxation, safety, calm, etc., that then allowed the client to receive new sensory information about whatever body part you happen to be working with at the moment, and in fact the whole body. Okay. So that means that to do that effectively, the practitioner has to learn a lot about their own mind and body, and they have to develop certain abilities, both mental and emotional and physical. And Milton always said, you cannot give what you do not have. Okay. So you can only accomplish this to the extent that you have learned to create that same sense of calm and relaxation and all of that in your own mind and body. Okay. So in that way, Traeger is much more than even than that approach to working with a client that we just talked about. It is also a path for personal growth and development for the practitioner. Okay. I mean, if you're learning what I just said is necessary to learn, that is going to benefit you. Okay. And when you are working with a client, you're hopefully constantly keeping in mind that you're wanting to convey this certain feeling state to your client, and so you're kind of checking in with yourself. If you're working with somebody and next thing you know you're thinking about, okay, well, later when I go to the grocery store I'm going to get blah blah blah, that is an example of a time that a Traeger practitioner would take a pause. A pause is a big part of the work. Okay. One, because you need to be in a certain state. And when you, let's say you're working on somebody's shoulder, at neck and shoulder, it's very tight and protected. And you've been working for a while and you're feeling changes in the tissue, you're feeling things relax, you're getting more free movement of the head and neck. Well, that's another time. And if the client, let's say the client takes a big, just a spontaneous deep breath, something's happening in their autonomic nervous system. That is a release. So that's another time to pause, because that gives their nervous system the time to kind of integrate that information. Does that make sense?
Okay, so you're using this relaxation of the autonomic nervous system to affect the whole body, it sounds like.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. Yeah. And Milton developed this work first in like the 1970s, and then it was in early 80s that he started like kind of sharing it. Something that for a long time it was just something he just did on his own, and it didn't have a name. It wasn't, um, but anyway, he always referred to working with the mind, the mind, the mind. Well, I think if he was here today, he would be saying that he was working with the autonomic nervous system, because that's what it amounts to. And that's my interpretation, but I think it's pretty accurate.
Yeah.
So it is a couple of things that make it very different than most other approaches. Is it's really not goal oriented. It really isn't.
That's interesting.
Yeah. It is this state that you are wanting to create in that person's mind and body, that then, like I said, it allows them to accept new on an unconscious level, and maybe at some point conscious, but more importantly unconscious level, to accept new sensory information. Okay, if let's go back to that person with the tight neck and shoulder. To some degree, their whole experience probably is of this tightness there, tension. They may not, for a long time, they may not have had the experience of this just being like completely free and easy. Okay. So in order for their nervous system to learn a new pattern, this is about changing patterns. Okay. For their nervous system to learn a new pattern, they have to have a different experience. If they just keep like doing the same thing over and over again, there's no opportunity for that to change. But if you introduce new information, and if you continue to reinforce that in some way, and there's some things we should talk about that, how that reinforcement, that repetition would occur. That's what neuroplasticity is. That is how then the nervous system learns something new. And according to Milton, and I think that is accurate, given the choice, the body will always go with what's better, healthier, more comfortable, so that's how you would go about replacing an unhealthy pattern with a more healthy one.
Would it be fair to say that the people, when they accomplish this improvement, could reach some kind of even though it's not goal oriented, do an activity they might have been struggling to do or something like that, which would be functional, so they could improve their functional ability in an area based on
course. Of
so
course.
So in a way,
yeah,
that might be, it could be a goal to, of the treatment, to just be able to function better.
It is, of course. What I meant when I said it's not goal oriented is, unlike normal PT, where you're like, okay, this shoulder has this issue, whatever it might be, and I am going to do XYZ, and my goal is I am going to I'm going to increase shoulder flexion from
right okay.
90 degrees to 120 degrees or whatever. But absolutely, yes. I mean, function, posture, walking, all of your daily activities absolutely will be improved as these changes occur in the body. So this is a good time to bring up the other thing I was going to mention. Okay, so there are two aspects to the Traeger approach. One is the table work, where the practitioner is working on the client physically, manually, and generally speaking, that person is lying on a massage table. I mean, it can be done in sitting for, if there's a reason to do that, but the common thing is the person's lying on a massage table. They can be clothed or unclothed, really, to their, whatever their preference is. I mean, they could just be wearing underwear, or they could be fully clothed. It doesn't really matter. So that's the table work, and then the practitioner is moving the body, the head and neck, the extremities, the torso, in rhythmic, gentle way. The work is very gentle. Anyways, so they're moving the body in very rhythmic and like comforting ways that kind of lull the nervous system into this state that we talked about. Okay, now the other part is something called mentastics, which is a term that Milton came up with, which to him it meant mental gymnastics, which I don't know. I've never been totally happy with that terminology, because it's not exercise. It's definitely not exercise. It's in fact, they're really kind of non directed, not it in the same way that the other work is not goal oriented. Mentastics are not goal oriented. The purpose of mentastics is for that person to become curious and aware of their own body and nervous system, and to kind of discover what feels good in their own body in terms of movement, what works. Right now, I have some tightness in my shoulder, in my trap and my pecs. And so if I was doing mentastics, it's more a thing where you're kind of playing with it, feeling, okay, well, that feels better there than it feels here, or something.
So this would be
Anyway,
something that the client's doing for themselves.
Yes,
Okay.
yes. So the practitioner teaches them mentastics, teaches them how to do mentastics. They don't teach them. They suggest certain movements because if you just said to somebody, okay, I want you to play with your shoulder and see what feels better. I mean, the person would be like, what? I have no idea what you're talking about.
Okay.
So you suggest things to them that they might try. Okay. But then it's up to them to play with that and experiment and find on their own what works, what feels best, what creates the greatest sense of relaxation there. And ideally, those you would, when a client walked in the door, you would do some movement with them and kind of see where they're at that particular day, that particular time. And then you would do some Mentastics afterward, based on what happened when they were on the table. Okay, if you're working with, we've been talking about neck and shoulder, but it could be anything. It could be low back, it could be a knee, but to suggest some movements to that person that they might do on their own to help them recreate those feelings that they got on the table, that feeling of freedom and lightness and softness and all of that in that tissue. And that is what I meant by through repetition. They might see the practitioner. They might see them every week. They might see them once a month. They might see them twice a year. But if they are practicing Mentastics on their own, they are constantly, reinforcing those new patterns in their nervous system that we talked about, and through neuroplasticity, they are learning something different.
Okay.
So,
Would
yeah.
it be, do you ever, if somebody had a session and then they were at home doing things, do you ever check in with them, like via Zoom or some type of video contact, or is it pretty much always face to face?
Well, I mean, until COVID, none of us, it didn't occur to any of us to do that, I don't think, really. But I have done some of that. So it just depends on the situation. I mean, if there's a need to do that, absolutely, absolutely. And there are during COVID, those of us who are therapists of different kinds are accustomed to touching people, and working with people.
Yeah.
And so it was really bizarre for all of us to not be able to do that. And very much so with the Traeger community. So the U.S. Traeger Association started having weekly meetings where somebody would lead and everybody would practice Mentastics. And then that kind of led to these people needed to figure out a way to generate some income, so that led to people figuring out ways to work with their clients online. With Mentastics, with self movement practices. So yes, we definitely did some of that. Now I don't tend to, because I don't have to.
Okay. What
Yeah.
would be just a couple, you're going to give people a couple pieces of advice about Traeger, what would that be? And also, is this something that somebody who's getting traditional physical therapy or some other treatment could benefit from as an adjunct, or in addition to the existing therapies that they're going through?
Absolutely. And for the reasons that I just mentioned, you are in the process, you are creating new movement patterns that are much more functional than old restricted ones.
Right.
So yes, and I mean it's certainly not a majority, but there are a number of physical therapists that are Traeger practitioners. And Traeger always influenced, and kind of flavored how I did PT. My manual techniques, they were always Traeger based.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Um,
So, do you have any kind of a case that you might recall that you give us an example of somebody where they were, what you did, and where they got to with the techniques that were applied as far as
sure,
improvement?
over time, of course, there's been, a number of people. And I just wanted to mention something. Um, in addition to things, painful conditions, Traeger is, I mean, it has a very good history of working with some neuromuscular things, Parkinson's. It's very beneficial for Parkinson's because it helps to reduce rigidity and that kind of thing. So I have had Traeger clients in the I don't have any now, but I have had Traeger clients in the past that had Parkinson's, and it was very helpful to them to reduce the rigidity, to help improve their gait and that. Um, More recently, I have a client that I see who, jokingly, I said to her the other day, I said, you got the full arthritis experience. I mean, she it's just, all of her joints, her shoulders, her knees, her hips, she's systematically having things replaced. Um, and but more recently, we've been working with her neck and shoulders. Her shoulders are, they're arthritic. Her range of motion is very limited. And I mean, I don't see her ever having shoulder replacements. She's now had her hips and knees done. But Traeger is very beneficial for her. Her cervical spine is restricted, particularly, her movement to the left is restricted. But when she comes in, we've been working on this. Well, actually, this time I've only seen her a few times. I didn't see her for a while. But when she comes in, usually when I start working with her head, to create movement in her neck, it's kind of like, it doesn't move. By the time we finish a session, I can kind of, rock her head side to side, always more to the right than to the left, but still, there's a definite relative improvement. Um, and same thing with her shoulders. Um, her well, in general, I mean, her all of her movement is restricted: flexion, abduction, certainly rotation. Um, but again, by the end of a session, she's got, oh, I don't know, say a good 30% more movement, I'd say.
That's a good
you
gain.
know
That's,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah, and maybe more. um and um so I've been reminding her of what she can do on her own, you know to to reinforce that, with the repetition, to help her keep that fluidity in between sessions. Yeah. um
Okay.
there was something. Oh, okay, so the I just wanted to mention also that, um kind of overall philosophy. You the practitioner, in what they learn about their own body movement, mind state, and what they teach to the client is take this with you. Take it with you into the course of your day. Whatever Milton, he always said, what could be easier? What could be lighter? What could be softer? So whether you're taking a walk, and he would describe his way of walking as a feeling of kind of being carried along. In other words, a certain effortlessness. Okay. And you can take that with you into whatever you're doing, whether you're walking or you're making dinner or you're mowing the lawn. It is that mindset that it really does start to create changes in your way of functioning. I mean, I think that's inevitable.
As well, we what we tend to see, you've probably heard this too, as well. I'm having pain when I'm doing this. I'm just going to push through it. I'm just going to keep going into the pain, which never
Right.
seems to have a good outcome. So, this kind of thing is great for those kind of people to look. You can't just keep doing that.
Right. That will have a pretty predictable outcome, but it won't be the one you
Right.
want.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Okay. Well,
Yeah.
any other last anything else you'd want to let people know about Traeger, and then how can people get in touch with you if they want to find out more about it too?
Okay. Oh, yes, I did want to mention, um, I have a YouTube video, and the what you would search for that is the Traeger approach, body work, and movement awareness. It's just a little over 5 minutes, but it's a pretty good representation of what a session looks like.
Can you repeat that
Um,
again? The Traeger approach to.
yeah, the Traeger approach, um, body work, and movement awareness.
Okay, great.
And then to get a hold of me, the best way is marvasletton@gmail.com. And that's MARVAS, like Sam, LETTEN @gmail.com.
All
And I'm
right.
in Fort Myers, Florida.
That's helpful for people to know as well, for sure.
Yeah.
So, all right. Well, I want to thank you a lot for coming on this and sharing the information about this with people. So hopefully they can maybe get in touch with you and make their lives better with this. And